sure that you've got a mic that actually works. How many times, Laurel, have you had, can't hear you, get these text messages via Skype because somebody's mic isn't on. It's just not connected right.
Oh, exactly. And the time zone thing has definitely caught me multiple times. Is if you're not, like, if you can use those schedulers, like Schedule Me or Schedule Once, that one changes time zones for
That's good, but
your
don't
host.
rely on it. I always say 5 p.m. Eastern because you and I are both in Nashville. People think we're on the Eastern time zone.
So you only do interviews at one time? 5 p.m. Eastern. That's David's time.
Not a minute later. No, it's always Eastern because sometimes people, one, either think that Nashville is on the Eastern time zone already, but the real reason is because a lot of people don't know how to compute time, believe it or not. In some places, like Phoenix and all of Arizona, they don't change the time zone.
And that's something that really didn't occur to me. I mean, most of my businesses in the past have been very Nashville based, and everyone's in Nashville, and you're meeting with people in Nashville. And once I started doing this podcasting and talking with people all across the U.S., actually overseas as well, then time zones became really important, but it wasn't something I considered right off the bat.
It's the equivalent of giving out your area code when you give out your phone number. It wasn't important at one time, but nowadays we can take our area codes with us, and a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. I'll see all the time local people that still haven't changed the area code from the last place they live just because they want to keep their same number.
Yep.
And that makes sense. So, hey, let's move on. Let's talk about before the host hits record, because I think this is really important.
So you mean like once you get on the call with the person?
Let's say it's via Skype, it's a podcast thing, and something I really appreciate when I'm doing an interview, they say, David, real quick, I want to make sure I know who your audience is. They should have done it ahead of time, but if they don't, I still appreciate them saying it, because a lot of times me with my background in the music business, sometimes people will think it's musicians, and it's not from musicians at all.
So this is the time when you get on the call with the host and like kind of the 5 minutes before they actually hit record and you go into the interview.
You're just checking out the levels. You're just checking out to make sure your stuff works. And hey, David, I just want to verify who your audience is.
That's perfect. And not even just who the audience is, but what they're interested in as well. Because even say the audience is business owners, well, they might be really interested in how you grew your business, or they might be really interested in how you quit your job, in my case. So just kind of looking at, if you don't already know the specific topic that their audience is interested in, ask the host. It doesn't hurt to ask.
What will best help your audience? Make it all about the host and making the host look good. If you make the host look good, the host is going to make you look good.
Exactly. And I think also seeing when it's going to be released, because especially if you have a product coming out or releasing a book or anything like that, you want to know whether the podcast or interview or radio show is going to come out before or after this, because you don't want to be talking like, oh, my book's coming out next week, and your book launched the week before by the time that interview is released. So be sure to get on the same page with the host about that.
But not only that, but when you know when it's going to be released, you can help the host promote it, do some of his work, which is always going to get you a good spot with the host.
Totally.
All right, one more thing I think it's worth saying, because working on radio and also on podcasts, on radio, broadcast radio, you've got to keep it clean. The FCC,
that's hard for you, isn't it, David?
And we're keeping this one clean, but I've done a good job.
We're trying.
We use the word fudge a lot.
Fudge. This is not how we actually talk in our home. Our home is not clean.
Triple X.
Nobody has to know that.
So anyway, verifying that, should you keep it clean, just verifying it. I think that I always try to do it clean if I can, but at the same time, there's some podcasts that are exceptionally dirty, maybe. And
really?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
In that case,
what are those?
You might want to. Well, some of the comedy podcasts, depending on if you're in more of the entertainment space, some of the guys off of Comedy Central, my ears start burning.
I know.
They're smoking and on fire, and maybe a little blood's coming out of them when I hear those things. I'm like, whoa. And I'm used to dealing with musicians, so.
And I've had some people contact me to be on their show, And they think because of the title of my podcast and blog is Go Fire Yourself, and because I write kind of edgy, that I'm going to come in there with all these cuss words or something. So it's kind of nice to ask them what, if they want to keep it clean. And just if you don't know one way or another, just assume that it's going to be clean.
Yeah, both of us are really edgy on our personal blogs. But because of syndication, because of where the podcast is going out, because of how the podcasts are consumed, for example, in the car with people around, the last thing that I want to do for somebody who's a fan of the blog is to be offensive to somebody at their work or to freak the kids out and, have the guy's wife get on him and say, hey, you can't listen to that. Because I want this thing to be consumed. And I think most hosts are that way. And I still look at podcasting with the same old school FCC broadcast radio rules, which is, keep it clean. It'll be edgy, but it will be clean.
And also ask the host if they're doing edits, if they don't already tell you that they are, because that might put you a little more at ease knowing that, okay, if you mess up, if you say something wrong, they can take it out. Like if you drop the F-bomb, not the end of the world, you can just pause and keep going. So that can help you as well.
Well, what about during the interview? I think that we hit on one thing a little bit earlier, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into it, that you got to be friendly with the host. And one of the ways to do that, have you ever had an interview, Laurel, where like the guy's just belligerent? Like sometimes
I don't think so.
Well, sometimes the host, you're being interviewed because you're an expert. And sometimes the host hasn't necessarily done that work. For example, if you're buying and selling real estate, I bought a few houses, sold a few houses, but I don't know a lot about real estate. And sometimes you'll see hosts that will kind of stumble around something. Don't make them look like an idiot. Be friendly and engaging and find ways to work around those common misconceptions, because you and the host are going toward the same goal, which is to make the host look good, to make you look good, help you sell product, help the host get listeners, help the host sell advertising. So I think the more friendly and engaging you can be, don't disagree with the host. I like to use the rule of yes, and. It's an old improv rule where if Laurel were to say something, she said, David, it's raining. Even if it's not, I would say yes, and then
hold on,
change
let me
the
try
subject
this.
to something else.
Let me try this. David, will you wash the dishes?
Yes, and I've got a towel right here for you to dry them.
Sweet. I love this. This works, guys. Just saying.
It works on podcast. I'm not sure how it works
This
in the
is a
household.
podcast.
Well,
So,
yeah.
This is
Yeah.
exciting.
Well, don't try it off the podcast. That's what I'm
okay.
saying.
Rules of engagement there. Well, I think that's I like what you said there, is like you're partners with the host and working towards the same goal. So you got to be on the same team going forward.
All right, I'm going to try an experiment, and I'm going to try the experiment right now. Can you hear any difference right now when I'm having this experiment going on, Laurel?
Yeah, now you sound like you're echoey
Yeah.
in a cave.
Stay on the mic.
Love it.
Stay on the mic. Use headphones if you need to. Make sure you're up on that thing. Stay on it. I can't stand, you don't hear this in radio so much, but I hear it in podcast all the time. I don't think people understand how microphones work. You got to be up on it. Got to speak into it for it to pick you up. It's not picking up everything. If it was picking up everything, you'd hear more of the dogs barking, more of the traffic going by outside. Be up on it.
How close are you to your mic right now?
I'm 3 fingers away, so that's probably
like
about
4.
an inch and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
well, I got big
close,
fingers.
very close.
Yeah.
That's true.
So about an inch and a half. When you're on that mic, don't plug yourself the whole time. I think that it takes some trust to have a good interview, and you have to trust. I've never given an interview where I was not allowed to plug myself at the end. Hosts are looking for great content, especially on radio. This is not advertising, so give them great content, and then they're going to allow you to plug your stuff. Remember when you had the retail store, Laurel?
I remember that.
Yeah, you were. We'll get more into that on future episodes, but you were on television quite often, and you would go in and you would be showing like the latest trends and various clothing, and it wasn't like, yeah, you can go buy it at my store. Yeah, you can go buy it at my store. Yeah, you can go buy it at my store. You weren't giving plugs. They were going to give you a plug there at the end. Hey, if you like any of this fashion that you've seen today, any of this content, basically, Here's where you can purchase it.
Yeah, you have to earn people's trust by giving the good show and the good content first. And because there's no point to plug yourself in the beginning because no one trusts you and no one knows you. So really hold that off till the end, I say.
I want to finish this interview up. I'm not really interviewing you, am I? This
talk on interviews.
This talk on interviewing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We chat.
We're just having a discussion.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what to do after the interview. And this is something that rarely ever happens. And if you do it, especially on a podcast, you're going to be memorable. You're going to get to come back. Any kind of mistakes you made during the podcast, they might actually overlook them. And that's to follow up with a thank you. It really, really, really makes a huge difference. I like to follow up personally with a postcard through the mail. I've followed up with gifts before. If I'm talking to a host and he says, hey, I'm interested in this, I'll send out books. That happens quite a bit. And for me personally, one time, I didn't even bring this stuff home, Laurel, but did you know, like, over the holidays, like, some guy sent me, like, a ham and...
Really?
Yeah, some, like, beef stick kind of... And I'm vegetarian.
And you're a
which is why it was so funny.
vegetarian.
But here's the
do
thing,
your
though.
research on the gifts.
Well, but even with that, though, I was so gracious to these guys. I got this huge thing from it's a famous restaurant. If you've seen the Nashville TV show, they're always talking about the Loveless Cafe. They make biscuits. It's like if you want to gain some weight, you can go to the Loveless Cafe. Ham, a lot of gravy up in there. And these guys
chicken.
sent me a ham. They sent me, I guess, some canned jellies and jams and kind of country food, right? And I was so gracious just that they were like, hey, thanks for your support this year. All I did was an interview with them.
I think
Pretty nice, right?
I think that's great because one of the guests on my show, and I'll just say this really quick because we're running out of time. One of the guests on my show, he told me about a book, and I said, I haven't read that. And he sent it to me in the mail from Amazon, and then he followed up with me and wanted to discuss it with me. And out of all the podcast interviews that I've done, it was very memorable. I mean, he's on my mind now as somebody that I want to stay in touch with. So that is a memorable touch, right?
Well, it builds that relationship and it takes it off the interview, which is very, they say to make friends with people who buy ink by the barrel. In other words,
Never heard that.
People, or don't get angry with somebody who buys ink by the barrel. It works either way. What you want to do is you want somebody with a big mic and a big reach, and this is one way to do it. Laurel, speaking of, probably the best thing to do after an interview is to share the interview if it comes or when it comes out, if you like it, with other people. And if you like this, talk on interviews, please share it with people. If you've got questions for us, stuff you want us to cover in the future, you can reach us online at redpodcast.com. You can get through to me directly, to Laurel directly, and we're hanging out there like all the time now, right? Redpodcast.com.
That's all I do.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I practically inserted myself in the internet, so I'm there all the time.
All right, and next episode of Red Podcast, we are going to talk about how to actually give a good interview. Laurel and I have done dozens or maybe even
hundreds,
a couple hundred of these things. Yeah. So we'll talk more about that on the next episode of Red Podcast.
All right. See ya, David.